Sleep is the number one thing that can increase your productivity, your energy, and your overall well-being. But since I'm a negative Nathan, instead of telling you what sleeping can do for you, I'm gonna tell you what not sleeping will do to you. So in our second video on sleep, with the last one being circadian rhythms linked below, we're gonna talk about sleep deprivation. In statistics, the law of complement says that the probability of something happening is 1 minus the probability of it not happening. So although I'm going to tell you about how not sleeping hurts you, the inverse of this is true for how sleeping correctly will help you. With that, let's talk about how your sleep schedule is the root of all your unhappiness. I might be biased, but that doesn't mean that I'm biased. See, there's a lot of sources I have for all of these points, by the way, so for brevity's sake, I'm going to try to limit it to 1 or 2 studies, maybe 3 max, for all the points I have here. I'm going to leave the source material in the description. If you want to read more, you can look at that, you can Google it, and you'll find it all there. It's a Notion site, same as the last one, and it has all the information written there from me, all of the sources cited with links to the research papers and everything. You may not have access because they are from journals, but hopefully you can find it somewhere. But yeah, all of it is in the description below under sources. And so now we can talk about your biggest problem in our first point, attractiveness. A study conducted with 23 participants had them all sleep for 8 hours in a night, and then they were photographed, and then had them stay awake for 31 hours, so no sleep for 31 hours, and then they were photographed once again. These photos were randomized and shown to 65 random observers, untrained, just normal people, and those 65 observers rated that all the people that were sleep deprived appeared less healthy, more tired, and more unattractive. The researchers found that compared to when you sleep normally, or compared to when at least these 28 people slept normally, they were found to be much less attractive than if they were under a full night's if they were under a full night's sleep, or they were, you get the point. I thought train said doo-doo, bye-bye. Yeah. So you've heard of beauty sleep before, and it turns out, well, it's true. I have a bunch of other sources, again, linked in the Notion site under sleep deprivation and attractiveness, but it seems like beauty sleep is completely true. And I can speak for myself when I say that I don't need sleep deprivation making me more unattractive. I can handle that all on my own, but what I can use sleep deprivation's help with is, well, the next thing. And let's move on to that. But before that, I'm a small channel. Please make small channel less small. Hit the buttons, subscribe, like, whatever, the bell. I don't know. You know, you've heard this from everyone. Hit them from me. Yeah, thank you. On to the next one. All-cause mortality is the scientific way of saying death by anything. And so in a meta-analysis looking at over 1.3 million subjects, researchers found that under short sleep conditions, so less than 7 hours, there's a 12% increased chance at all-cause mortality. And then under long sleep, so more than 9 hours, there is a 30% increased chance at all-cause mortality. What this tells us is that under insomnia or hypersomnia, there is an increased chance at several morbidity and all-cause mortality. Several morbidity is the chance of having multiple illnesses or conditions at the same time. And what this gives us is a U-shaped curve between sleep duration and several morbidity. And so we can see that it goes up for insomnia, up for hypersomnia, but it stays neutral or decreases depending on the reference that you're using for between 7 to 9 hours, which is the healthy amount of sleep for the average person. And so we can see that in the paper, they don't even say all-cause mortality half the time. They just say, they just flat out say chances of dying. They just straight throw it in there in the paper. There's probably a picture on the screen or something it was really funny reading that one. But anyways, the researchers give 5 reasons in the paper why this might be the case. One of them is direct mortality, which is given by rats dying within about 2 weeks after subjected to sleep deprivation. The next one is given by sleep being a moderating or mediating factor, which is something where sleep is involved in your death. So maybe sleep deprivation caused you to get in a car accident. Maybe sleep deprivation decreased your willpower, increased your addictive tendencies, and you did drugs and you died from that. And then one of the other reasons they give is that sleep is causally linked to other things, and sleep deprivation will cause your death from those. So, for example, sleep deprivation is causally linked to Alzheimer's disease, which is it's a neurodegenerative disease that will kill you, and we're going to talk about that more in a second. But the other 2 you can find in the paper. I'm going to leave the script as well, source in the description, so that you can find these specific links in the script, and it'll be easier than going through the entire 500 pages of the Notion page. So I'll leave that in the description as well. But anyways, if you don't sleep or you sleep too much, your chances, your flat rate of dying increases. So that's fun, isn't it? Yeah. On to the next one. The next thing I definitely don't need sleep deprivation helping me with is intelligence. It might seem like I'm making this video on research papers and numbers and all this stuff, but trust me, Notion is the smart one. Shout out the Notion team. Love them. I'm just illiterate. To prove it, I'm going to read my script. Is this a cop-out joke for me to read my script? Absolutely. Is that okay? Yeah. How many people are really going to watch this? In a study with 20 participants, one group got 8 hours of sleep, while the second group got no sleep and no caffeine. This study was Matthew Walker, by the way, big guy in the sleep thing. Maybe you've seen his TED Talks. He was on Joe Rogan once. Great guy, great stuff from him. A lot of things I've learned came from him. But anyways, and the next day, after the all-nighter, the next day they were told to learn a list of new facts as the scientists took fMRI scans, so functional magnetic resonance imaging. To be honest, that's probably no clearer than fMRI, is it? They shove a needle in your body and it does magnet thing in big magnet machine, and the image get taken of the magnet thing, and they can see your brain. Yeah, they use it for finding tumors. They use it for finding anything going wrong in there. And anyways, really good thing. You've heard of this somewhere. Brains that didn't sleep were 40% less effective at forming new memories. The hippocampus, which is involved in learning and memory formation, had plenty of activity in people that did sleep, while it had no significant activation whatsoever in people that didn't sleep. A cause of this may be the accumulation of adenosine, which is the neurotransmitter involved in sleep pressure, which more on that in another video. And so the accumulation of adenosine, quote, functionally inhibit the induction of hippocampal long-term potentiation necessary for plasticity, end quote. Overall, they concluded that sleep, especially slow wave sleep, which is NREM 3 and 4, aids greatly in the formation of memories and ability for learning, or of learning. And I'm sure one day I'll make a video talking about that. Definitely gonna happen. Maybe a short if I can shove it into 1 minute, because I think shorts are interesting, and I wouldn't mind making that, because it's probably a lot easier to make and edit than this 50 billion minute video. As for students such as myself, there was a study on 88 students at the chemistry class at MIT, where they tracked the students' sleep duration and quality for a semester, and found that almost every student that got a 90 or above in the class had an average sleep time of between 7 to 9 hours. They also found that greater sleep consistency, better sleep quality, and longer sleep quantity. So longer sleep, better sleep. If you're like doing alcohol and sleeping, that's bad quality. You might sleep for 10 hours, but the quality of that sleep is not going to be very good. Alcohol is a psychoactive sedative. You might think it's putting you to sleep. It is not. It is ruining your brain. They also found that greater sleep consistency, better sleep quality, longer. Yeah. So all of that accounted for about 25% of the variance in overall grade performance. And the results of an exam were based on an entire month of sleep, rather than just one night before the exam. And so they found that the students that were sleeping better just had better scores overall. There's going to be a graph on there, or there probably was already a graph on screen that showed that from the paper. Yeah. Anyways, on to the next point. I want to mention two more things before we go into rapid fire mode, because it's probably been a while and I'm sure I've spent 45 minutes trying to record all of this and say all of this correctly. In a study with 26 participants, researchers subjected the participants to 1 week of 8 hours of sleep and then 1 week of 6 hours of sleep. So merely 2 less hours, which also I believe is the average sleep time in America, around 6.5 hours. And so after both of these sleep conditions, the researchers took their blood and took all the participants' blood and then compared them later. What they found was that 711 gene expressions were different. 444 genes were down-regulated, meaning they turned off, and 267 genes were up-regulated, meaning they turned on. I think I have those numbers right. And there will be a screenshot on the screen probably with the highlights and everything. But after this, they found that the genes that turned off or were down-regulated were related to immune function. And then they found that the genes that were up-regulated, that turned on, were related to tumor promotion, chronic inflammation, and chronic stress causing cardiovascular problems. Not sleeping for even 2 hours will change literally your genetic code. We also know that sleeping for 4 or less hours a night can decrease your natural killer cells, your cancer fighting cells, by up to 70%, 70%. The last thing that I want to mention here is Alzheimer's disease. So we have found there's a causal relationship, causal meaning that it is not merely correlated, it is caused by Alzheimer's, or sleep deprivation causes Alzheimer's. There's a causal relationship between sleep deprivation and Alzheimer's. And so when we look at Alzheimer's disease, we can actually find two main proteins involved, at least that we can see at this point, related to Alzheimer's disease and the progression of the disease. And so these are beta amyloid and a little bit less understood or a little bit less well known, tau. Tau is a good protein. Tau holds up the neurons like pillars holding up a tunnel. And so it's good. It makes it so the neurons can communicate really nice, well, smooth, and fluidly. However, in Alzheimer's disease, we can see what we call tau tangles. It seems like these tunnels, the tau, they collapse and they start mixing and mashing, and it makes it so that the tunnels are all collapsed. And going back to that analogy, it's like the signals can't get through, the cars can't move through, and so the neurons aren't able to communicate correctly anymore. The other one, a little bit more well understood, is beta amyloid, and this is the other sticky toxic protein involved in Alzheimer's disease. And what we can see is that beta amyloid actually builds up non-homogeneously in the brain. What that means is that it builds up in some areas and it doesn't build up in others. And this is one of the reasons we believe that beta amyloid is involved, is because in Alzheimer's patients, something that we don't see is a decrease in motor function and a decrease in ocular function. So their eyesight and everything is fine. We can see, even though it's a neurodegenerative disease, their motor cortex is completely fine, and their ocular cortex, I don't know if that's a word, their occipital lobe, their eye function is completely fine. And what we see is that beta amyloid actually doesn't build up in these areas of the brain, and so that might be one of the reasons that they're completely intact. Where beta amyloid does build up is the medial prefrontal cortex. When you go to sleep during NREM 3 and 4, so deep, slow wave sleep, very nice, we see that a lot of these slow waves actually, radiate from the medial prefrontal cortex of the brain. They come, not all of it, they come from everywhere in the brain, but it seems like the epicenter, the main area of these deep, slow, or these massive slow waves are the medial prefrontal cortex, which is the main long-term memory center of the brain. So although the hippocampus is involved in memory formation and learning, it's a short-term storage, while the medial prefrontal cortex is long-term storage. This is where the memories get like stored in the big old like SSD. And so what we see is that beta amyloid actually builds up in this area of the brain as you are awake and as you go through your day. And everyone, you, me, everyone else. What we see is that during this slow wave sleep, the interstitial space in the brain gets 60% larger, or increases by 60%. And what this means is that if you think about it as a town, the building, so your brain cells really, they get smaller by 60%, meaning that the roads get bigger by 60%. And what happens after that is that cerebrospinal fluid, which is fluid that travels through your spine and your cerebro, so your brain, and it travels up the spine and it cleans the brain out. It washes everything out. And one of the things that it washes out is actually beta amyloid, because again, it grows in everyone throughout the day, because surprise, surprise, being awake is actually low-level brain damage. One thing that we see, which is a bit sad, is that when you have beta amyloid in the brain, so it builds up in the brain, we actually see less slow waves. So the slow waves are either lower in amplitude or they're just not occurring as much. What this shows us is that there's also less cleaning happening. And the sad part about that is that it means that the more the beta amyloid doesn't get cleaned, the less that it will get cleaned the next day. And so what this creates is a non-linear exponential curve of beta amyloid buildup in the brain. And then we can map this onto the Alzheimer's, like the progression of the Alzheimer's disease, and we see the same non-linear exponential curve of Alzheimer's. So the sad part is that if you mess your sleep up for even a few days, that's going to continue to mess your sleep up for the coming months. And it's going to make itself worse. And at one point, reversing it may be really, really hard. And it's really, really sad and really unfortunate. And that's why it's important to make sure your sleep hygiene is correct the entire way through. But now with that, we're going to go ahead, continue on with the sadness ball, because sleep deprivation is just a big old sadness ball. And we're going to go to the rapid fire points next. All right, now we're just going to read off of bullet points, because I don't want to make a 5-hour video. You don't want to watch a 5-hour video. So here's a thunder round of what happens when you do not sleep. We'll start with the physical issues that transpire, starting with lower immune function, which we just went over, increased chronic inflammation, increased risk of cardiovascular disease, and 45% increased risk of heart attacks, irregular blood sugar levels, increased risk of certain cancers, increased risk of Alzheimer's, increased risk of motor accidents, less attractive appearance, lower testosterone for men, the same follows for estrogen in women, increased risk of obesity due to an increased propensity towards unhealthier foods, increased all-cause mortality, chances of dying, reduced effects of vaccines and antibody production. So if you get a vaccine, it will be less effective in your body, not because the vaccine's bad, but because your body's not doing it correctly or handling it correctly. Now, for doctors, if you are a doctor or you want to be a doctor, medical residents working 30-hour shifts are 460% more likely to make a diagnostic mistake in the ICU, the intensive care unit. Those same residents have a 116% increased chance of getting in a car accident on their way home. And then when they go to the surgery room because they just got in a car accident, senior surgeons under 6 or less hours, senior surgeons, people that have been doing their job for a while, they know what they're doing, under 6 or less hours of sleep have a 170% increased risk chance at making a major surgical error compared to that same surgeon if they had slept correctly. Now, 460%, 116%, 170%. In science, we call those big effing numbers. And so as for the mental effects of sleep deprivation, they include the following: lower emotional regulation / poor emotional affect. So you're less like, you're not going to show emotional as well. So if you found joy in something, maybe you're not going to laugh in a way that people might just think you're being a jerk, who knows. Increased tendency towards social isolation, so it makes you more lonely. It makes you just make yourself more lonely, basically. Increased prognostic towards anxiety, increased prognostic towards depressive disorder, decreased cognitive cognitive function / decreased cognitive cognitive impairment, changes in neuronal plasticity, decreased memory capacity, increased sensitivity to gains, so overacting to good things, and decreases sensitivity to losses, so underacting to bad things. And that might be flipped, it depends on who you are. Sleep deprivation might make you overreact to bad things and underreact to good things. Again, that one's a bit more varianced. Mental health and the mental reaction of people, they're going to be a lot more varied than the physical reaction of the human body, which we can see a lot more consistency of. So there are chances you might find papers that posit the opposite. If you go look at the Notion page, for example, there's a section on depression, and we see that there's actually a little bit of a contingency. I don't know if that's the right word, but we'll just say contingency. But there's not a consensus behind REM sleep making depression worse or better. Mental health is a bit more wild and wacky in the Wild West here than understanding the body and how that reacts to things. Because we can use machines to do that. At the moment, we can't really use machines to look into the mind. We can look at the brain, not the mind. But yeah. Anyways, that's the lightning round. So, conclusion. So overall, not sleeping is quite bad for your health. From lower immune function to vaccines not working, from cognitive decreases to Alzheimer's disease, it will destroy your body. And it will also affect your mental health. From poor emotional regulation or lower emotional regulation to an increased prognostic towards anxiety and depression. Sleep deprivation is incredibly important, and if you don't do it, we see an even overall increase in all-cause mortality. Overall, it's pretty important, and like we said at the top of the episode, sleeping correctly will be the #1 factor, at least I believe, at increasing your productivity, your intelligence, and it will help your attractiveness to as much a capacity as possible. Go to the gym, I guess that will help too. But it does a lot for you. But I'm not your dad. I'm not going to tell you what to do. So thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you in the next one. Good night. Much love. Peace.